USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, March 20th, 2023. Each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend and the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th, 2023 at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, the brackets came out last night, and leading into them, guys, was a terrific weekend of hockey.
Well, it's Christmas.
Yeah.
It's Christmas. You had unbelievable hockey on Friday, Saturday. You had the brackets yesterday, and today you got the transfer portal. What more do you want? How did actually, seriously, how do all four of those fit together, really? I mean, the transfer portal shouldn't be, but that's what the world we're living in. So anybody who didn't make the tournament could be, and they're unhappy, could be floating around as a free agent today. So yeah, that's it's Christmas, I guess. A lot of different holidays this weekend,
and the first day of spring.
No, but to answer your question, great weekend of hockey. I know, Jimmy, you got to see some live, and I watched every minute. And what great hockey! I mean, low scoring, tight checking, overtimes, drama. Poor Alaska, but what a great weekend of hockey.
Yeah, I thought that was seriously one of the best conference championship weekends I remember. There were not blowaways. There were some, I guess, a couple of 3-0 games, but one was a 1-0 with 2 empty netters. I think the other one was a 2-0 with an empty netter. So I mean, we did not. Everything else was either overtime or a 1-goal game the entire weekend. And maybe it's because of the fact that things have changed a little. That you don't have 6 conferences that are playing 3 games. You have 3 that are going with semifinals and a final, and you have 3 that have had their final already set. And those were just, single games. So you only had 12 games on the weekend on the men's side. But what an unreal weekend. And, I'm watching from afar. I broadcast all 3 of the Hockey East Championship games. All 3 went to overtime, 1 to double overtime. The ability to kind of just watch from afar and just keep watching the scoreboards and the number of games you would see that were through 2 periods, 0-0. I mean, I know this isn't our betting show, but holy crap, I hope everybody took the under all weekend. I think only 1 game went over the over-under for the entire weekend. That's kind of crazy, but I think that also is going to tell us a lot about what the NCAA tournament is going to be like. I think we're going to see some pretty low-scoring games in the tournament. Defense, goaltending seems to be winning.
And you throw in the women's championships. Those were going this weekend. And you had a 1-0, you had an overtime game and then a 1-0 championship game. Yeah. So, I mean, it was all over the place. What good hockey, though.
Yeah, I had a TV, a laptop, and a phone going all at once, trying to keep up with everything. Friday in particular, with 5 overtime games, and the one that didn't go to overtime was 1-0. It was crazy, but maybe hit a little bit on Friday. I think the big story on Friday had to be Colgate getting that overtime win over Quinnipiac. Colgate, the Cinderella story, making it through with a win over Harvard on Saturday.
Yeah, and Colgate never trailed. They jumped out to a 1-0 lead kind of early. Quinnipiac, as they often do, they chased, but they chased well, and they got back into the game. They scored in the 3rd period. They forced the overtime, but then Colgate finds the game winner. And Donnie Vaughn's team, after 30 years, he finally gets his championship. I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I mean, how fantastic is that? What a Cinderella story, So we were at TD Garden, and of course, anybody that knows the legendary John Powers, the longtime Pulitzer Prize winning author from the Boston Globe, he's always there on Friday night trying to figure out the pairwise. And I'll walk in and it'll be, James, I have a question for you. I know you have the answer. It's always related to the pairwise. And he said, the ECAC could get 4 teams in, and then 3 people at the table, including myself, all laughed because saying, well, Colgate's not going to get in. I mean, how's that going to happen? Well, Colgate got in, and what an accomplishment for that team. but it started with that Friday night game and having believability. I think that's a big part of it. And you have to believe that certainly Don Vaughn got his team to believe.
You know what? I didn't believe, because they had pressure after pressure after pressure. And then the same thing with Harvard. They had pressure at the end. And I just thought that the Cinderella shoe was going to drop. It wasn't going to happen. And they made me a believer. It was such a great story that you're like, this is too good to be true. And what a hats off job for Don winning after 30 years. I mean, it's I've been fortunate. It didn't take me 30 years, but it seems it took me 14. It seemed like 30, so I can imagine 30 seemed like 60 for him.
And I'm sure a lot of people around the coaching fraternity were happy for Don on this too.
One of the good guys of college hockey, one of the nicest gentlemen you'll ever meet. I've only really met him a couple of times, interviewed him in pregame type interviews on broadcasts. But he's fantastic. I mean, he's a great interview for one thing, but he tells it as it is. And he's I think he said he turned 62 this year, and he still has the enthusiasm of a young coach. And that's what you love to see.
On the other side of that, Quinnipiac, of course, they're the number 2 seed when we get to the brackets, but Rand Pecknold called it the worst game his team has played all season. What do you do with kind of a loss like that? Of course, we saw Yale when they won the national championship, losing the ECAC tournament and end up being the last team in. But you end your season with a loss like that heading into the NCAAs. But you got time to turn it around, right?
Yeah, I think it's more of just that's something that's going to fuel them a little bit. I think you watch somebody else celebrate. You watched from afar too. You didn't even get to play in the championship game. I think that's something that could really benefit them and knock them back to earth a little bit, because as good as you think you are, there's always, now it's kind of put them back to maybe just a little bit more towards reality that say, hey, we've got to dial it up. I bet you their practice today is going to be phenomenal. A lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and a chance to get back at it. And they're close to home. I think this could be a really good thing for Quinnipiac.
It certainly can. It befuddles me that team gets to the top of the mountain every year, but the one tournament they really struggle in is their league championship. And as many times that Rand Pecknold has won a regular season title in his career, between MAC, Atlantic Hockey, and the ECAC, he's had 10 regular season titles. His team has made the NCAA tournament 9 times, but in that whole span, he's only won 2 league championships. One, I'm trying to think if it was the MAC. It must have been the MAC back in 2001, and then one in the ECAC. It's just sometimes, some programs just struggle to get over certain humps, and league championships can be one of them. I've seen it many times where teams reach their league Final Four, almost every year, but then they bow out in the semifinals because it's sometimes the pressure just gets to you. I don't know what it is, but then you look at, what Rand Pecknold has done in the NCAA tournament. Usually not a one and done team. They usually win a game. They've reached 2 Frozen Fours, reached 2 national title games. But for some reason, that conference championship continues to elude Quinnipiac.
See, I think you said it there, and it's never a good thing to lose. It's never a good thing. So, I mean, I think this could be something that drives them a little bit. But you made a really good point there, because we lost. We won our first Atlantic Hockey Final Four when we weren't supposed to. We were a 5 seed. We were hot going into the tournament. There were some upsets. We ended up being, as a 5 seed, the home team in both the semifinals and the championship. So there was no pressure. It was, hey, let's just take advantage of this. We got a great opportunity, and then the next year when we were the 1 seed, and the year after that, when we were the 1 seed, and the year after that. And sometimes you just grip your stick a little bit more, and you feel like you have to win that. And I think that there's a lot to what you just said there about the pressure of being the one that's supposed to win. Now you get into the tournament, and now everybody's supposed to win because these are the best of the best. A 16, a 15, a 4 seed has won before. So now I think the pressure's not as high on them as it would be, because now you've just got to go out and play.
Also on Friday, a similar situation with Colorado College, the 1-0 upset of Denver, the shutout for Caden Mbarico. North Dakota was almost a Cinderella story there, took St. Cloud State to overtime. A rough season for North Dakota, a building program in Colorado College, and it seems like both those teams have found something maybe to give them a step ahead to get started next year.
I think certainly that's right, especially CC, and what Chris Mayotte has done there very quickly in turning around a program that I think they were a 4-win team a few years back. I mean, that's really significant to be able to take that step. And, I don't think anybody saw them getting past the quarterfinal round. Then you get to the semis and you're playing the number 1 team. Nobody sees you winning that one either. You end up pulling those victories off and coming close. I mean, St. Cloud was a great opponent in the championship game, but I think that CC has some upside. North Dakota, listen, they don't have downside often. I think they got bit by the injury bug a little bit this season, but they were playing their best hockey at the right time. They just ran into a St. Cloud State team that I don't know what I had for expectations coming into this tournament, into the NCHC tournament, but they proved that they now are playing really well at the right time. So a dangerous team heading into the NCAA tournament is St. Cloud.
Didn't surprise me about North Dakota and how close they got. That didn't surprise me one bit. I think I picked them over UNO. It didn't surprise me that they were in overtime, all that kind of stuff. CC, I think they just kind of ran out of gas. They spent so much energy. Just think of, they had to travel to Kalamazoo and then back and then they just spent a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm, and good run for them though. But I just think they ran out of gas and they ran into a better hockey team. And sometimes you have to tip your cap. I mean, I think once they got to 2-0, St. Cloud got 2-0, there was still that hope in me that for the underdog to say, hey, you know what, if they get the next one, they're going to get some life. But once it got 2-0, I think that the air came out of their balloon a little bit. And because I think they have trouble getting to 3. CC has a little bit of trouble getting to 3. And once they got to 2, you knew St. Cloud was going to lock it down.
Yeah, that was the problem. I agree with you, because that has been their struggle this year for CC is scoring the goals. If they can keep their opponent to 1, they get a chance, or 0, obviously. But they couldn't let that game get away from them, and it didn't. Not that it got far away from them. 2-0 is not far away. But
that's the funny. Yeah, we're saying the game got away from them.
It got away from them. They're down 2-0. But when you're not scoring goals, it definitely feels like you're down 10-0.
Hockey East had 2 big games on Friday. Providence downed in overtime by BU, and Merrimack a 2-1 win also over UMass Lowell. Those were 2 really tight, really exciting games.
Yeah, in both games, the team that ended up winning had moments where they struggled. BU actually trailed that game 1-0 against Providence. Their goaltender, Drew Comesso, probably played one of the best games I've seen, but he lost his stick on a random play, collided with his defenseman, and then gave up a goal from the half wall that was just thrown to the net, perfectly placed at the 5-hole between his legs. And here BU is chasing with, 3 or 4 minutes left in the game when they score the equalizer. Then they get the game winner. And listen, this is a good BU team. Providence had a fantastic run in the playoffs, having to go to overtime in all 3 of their games, all 3 decided by the same 2-1 score. Unfortunately for them, they were on the wrong side of the final one. But Merrimack, they easily could have folded. They had a 1-0 lead late, took a horrible icing, won the ensuing faceoff against a Lowell team that is fantastic at faceoffs. Merrimack dominated them in the circle that night, but then made a bad clearing pass. Lowell picks it off and then sets it up, scores the tying goal with 31 seconds remaining. And, you're saying, oh boy, Lowell, here they come. And they did. They came at Merrimack in the overtime. And if they played so well in that overtime period, but did not score. And that's how Merrimack held themselves in it. But by the end, Merrimack gets that game winner. They felt like that team of destiny. But as we'll get into talking about BU and their championship, maybe it was BU that had some destiny on their side.
I just want to say what a great turnout by the Merrimack fans. The line around there with the buses they had coming in. What a really good thing for their school to be able to get there. And, I know they were really upset after they lost in the finals. You could see it on their faces with the guys who got the all tournament teams. They mentioned that they wanted this for the school, but I think the school showed up. And I think you're going to see the school show up again in the NCAA tournament. So I'm away from that game a little bit. It got a little bit too late for me after watching all the games. So I passed on that overtime. I watched the highlights the next day. But, what a good thing for the school.
Yeah, they brought down 20 buses of students on Friday night. Then the next day, the next morning, I saw photos of the ticket office where it wrapped all the way from the front of the building, all the way through, snaked through the entire building, through the ice rink itself, all the way out to the back of the building for students that wanted to do it again on Saturday. So they packed that TD Garden. And before we get into the games themselves, credit to Steve Metcalf. We always talk about the attendance battle, and I know that you can say that Canisius and Minnesota, I think they were both at 100% capacity. But, when you're in the TD Garden, a building that has about 17,000 plus capacity, they had 13,007 on Friday night, 14,003 on Saturday night. Those were two really good attendances. I know Steve Metcalf was really proud of his team and the way that tournament was marketed. But those are great crowds. And the atmosphere in such a big building that you can lose atmosphere if you only have 6,000-7,000 fans in a 20,000 or 17,000, 18,000 seat arena. The atmosphere was great the entire weekend.
And that was what the NCHC after North Dakota was out. There was only, I think, 6,000 there for the championship game. 6,900 maybe.
Something like that.
Let's turn to the 3 championship games that were single games on the weekend. The most exciting, the craziest one, and probably the most disappointing for the losing team, was Northern Michigan losing 3-2 to Minnesota State in overtime. They're leading 2-0 with a little over 2 minutes to go. Minnesota State cuts the lead to 2-1, and then with less than a minute to go with the extra attacker on the ice, the Mavericks tie it and then only take 1 minute and 8 of OT to get the game winner at Mankato.
Well, I think Don Lucia said it when he was talking afterwards. They're used to crazy games in Mankato, that's for sure. With the Tech game, with the Bemidji last year. But there was a play with about right after the goalie was pulled. There was a pressure. The puck was in the neutral zone, and Northern looked like they were going to get it and going in for an easy empty netter. And a great back check. I don't remember the player's name, but there's a great back check that caused the puck to be turned over. They went back. They kept the puck in the zone. And then scored. Bounce. They got a great bounce, all that. Then the same thing, another bounce off of a side to a guy off the side of the net who just jammed it in. And you're thinking, oh my, because Northern, I didn't think Northern was going to blow that lead. They have been so hot. And we've been talking about it. I thought that it was just their time. And this was the game that was taken in the tournament. This was a winner take all. Right. Loser was going home no matter what. And what an unbelievable overtime goal! Kind of a spinorama backhand shot through the crease. But I thought Northern had it. I thought there was no way Northern was going to lose that. Credit to Mankato, Minnesota State for never quitting, and another unbelievable crowd, minus the drone flying around. I didn't see that one this time, but unbelievable. Really, another great hockey game that Mankato was involved in.
And you talk about how hard it is to sometimes win as the number 1 seed. Mike Hastings has now been the number 1 seed in his conference tournament 7 times. He's won 4 of them. That's pretty impressive because it is hard to get through those quarterfinal rounds, maybe those feel like the easy ones, but you get to those single elimination games, and so often you can drop one. Well, Minnesota State has done it well, and in 2 years in a row that they win the title on their home ice, that's going to feel fantastic. This is a pretty dangerous team now that they're in the tournament. It was a win to get in, as you mentioned, Schools, but there's experience on this team that got to within, what was it, about 11 minutes of a national championship last year. I feel like they could be a pretty dangerous team.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that bracket too. So that's going to be a fun one too. You throw that in there, and Fargo at a building. What an atmosphere you're going to see there too as well.
Jim, when we started out, you mentioned one game beat the over, and that was this one, Michigan 4 beating Minnesota on the road at Mariucci in front of a sold-out crowd, a 4-3 win for the Wolverines. And it seems like Michigan is kind of getting things together at just the right time after things looked a little bit off for them towards the end of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, perfect timing when you really think about it. There was a lot of weekend splits for them down the stretch, and I kind of wondered. I know, okay, they get the number 2 seed, but did they? Are they that good going into the tournament? They proved themselves. You fall behind in the third period on the road, and that place was nuts. Minnesota had a great crowd, a great atmosphere. You fall behind in that game in the third period, and it's easy to pack it in, but Michigan held with it. Got the tying goal. The whole thing is that after Minnesota took the lead, they didn't allow too much time to pass by before they finally found that tying goal. They found the tying goal, and then about 5-6 minutes later, the winning goal. Credit to everything this Michigan team stands for at this point, because they've been through a lot. You've lost your head coach from last year. That you after losing in the Frozen Four, you felt like you had a lot of players that left the team, so you didn't have the roster to come back. Here they are, Big Ten champions yet again. And I think we've talked about the Big Ten was maybe the hardest conference this year to win. So going on the road, winning that championship game, hats off to the Wolverines.
And I think they made us eat their words, because we've been saying defense, defense, defense. You're not going to be able to outscore them in the championships. You're going to have to be better in net, all that kind of stuff. They just outscored them. Granted, it wasn't a 6-5 game, but, we say the first to 3. Well, obviously they weren't the first to 3. And then obviously Michigan comes back and gets the next 2 to take the game 4-3. So not hats off to them. I think they've been the kind of, I wouldn't say the redheaded stepchild a little bit, but they've been the one that people kind of they've just said, they're there. Minnesota's going to win. And they went in and they went on a mission, but another unbelievable atmosphere too.
The last championship to mention was Atlantic Hockey, a 3-0 win for Canisius in Buffalo, which was essentially a 1-0 game with a couple of empty netters. Holy Cross coach Bill Riga said that Canisius was the best team down the stretch in Atlantic Hockey. And he's probably right. But the big number that stands out to me is Canisius goaltender Jacob Barcheski, who was the tournament MVP. In 7 games in the playoffs, he had a .963 save percentage and a goals against of 1.14.
Yeah, they didn't do it easy. They were when they played that 4-game weekend against Air Force, they were battling for that last spot, and they just went on a heater. And that kind of, like I said, it reminds me of us in 2014. We were the best team down the stretch. We got in at hot at a 5 seed. They got in hot as a 4 seed, and they just kept winning. They found ways to win. They had to go to 3 twice. So they played 7 playoff games. They had to beat Army in 3. They had to beat Niagara in 3, and then beat Holy Cross. They were used to playing elimination games.
Yeah.
And, 1-0. I watched the game in length. I know that the ice wasn't great, but there was a banged out crowd again. But they made the play that they needed to make. And then Barcheski was good. There was a big save that he made coming across the crease in the third period, which I thought was a for sure goal. And he stuck his leg out, made a big save, and kind of stabilized Canisius a little bit. But congratulations to Trevor Large. Canisius hadn't won since 2013. They hadn't been in the championship game since 2014, I think. No, maybe there was one other in the middle there, but they hadn't won since 2013. So, and it's his first as a head coach. So congratulations to Trevor Large.
Yeah. I mean, that tournament itself just kind of impressed me because you had two teams that were in the same position. They both had to go through 3-game series to get there twice. So they, both teams had their backs against the wall twice already in the postseason. Then you get into the winner take all championship game, and here they are again. Only one could prevail, and I know that Bill Riga probably has some disappointment that he wasn't able to do it, but I think he also knows he's put this program in really good hands. I've known him for 31 years. Great friend, great guy. He's a winner. Just a kind of a natural winner. So that Holy Cross team will get there. They will get back to the top. They are so darn close, and don't expect to see 7th place finishes out of them too often. They'll be a team that knows how to win. And
I was reminded by a discussion that came up over the weekend from a Buffalo sports writer who was clueless about it, that Atlantic Hockey does have the full complement of scholarships at 18. And I think this coming year will be the 4th year with that and finally in place with that. So the league has made steps forward. It was like 363 out of conference, almost where you need to get to get a couple more teams in. Hopefully Atlantic can keep the forward progress going and continue to be competitive outside the conference, because within it's pretty much a meat grinder.
I'm looking forward to the new team coming back into the league. That's what I'm looking forward to. You guys are looking forward to quieter Mondays.
I'm looking forward to a trip to Pittsburgh next season. Well, we're going to take a break and we'll come back and talk about the results of all these playoffs. And that was the Field of 16 announced on Sunday evening. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
Welcome back to USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. The NCAA Men's Division I Ice Hockey Committee announced the bracket last night. And, at first look, and even as it was coming out, Jim, you and I were working on getting things posted and talking on Zoom and needed 2 more hands to type on another keyboard. But as it was rolling out, we were thinking, yeah, this is pretty good. And Derek, you've been on the committee. What's your thoughts on, before we break it down, on the job that they did and the philosophy they took?
Well, I know, Jim, you talked to Jeff Schulman. I was texting with Jeff last night as well. Jeff obviously was on the committee when I was. And the one thing that's happened is since I was on the committee, and it's just been 2 Frozen Fours. I was on the committee in Pittsburgh, not last year in Boston, because obviously that would have been my last year on the committee. Rick Godkin took my place. There's been a complete and utter changeover. There's only 2 people left from the committee that I was on 2 years ago, and that's Jeff Schulman and Bob Daniels. So guys like Mike Kemp and Mike Schaefer and Mike Corbett was on it, and Steve Metcalf, we're all kind of transitioning off. So every committee's got a new personality. And usually when one guy comes in, it kind of conforms to the committee personality. When Mike Cross came in, he was the 4th Mike in the group.
That's right.
So it was Mike Corbett, Mike Schaefer, Mike Kemp, and we call him Mike the 4th. So he kind of came into our committee. This one is their own little, with all the new people on the committee, it's kind of taken a life of their own. And I think they did an outstanding job. I think they looked at it as a championship atmosphere. They were able to make some easy decisions, like why fly St. Cloud or Minnesota State all the way across the country when it was so tight. It was such a tight thing. And I think that they've taken this and made it just it's going to be almost like a mini Frozen Four in almost each venue, because I think the attendance is going to be knocked out of the park in all of them. I don't see one that could have bad attendance. And I just think it's going to be, I think they did a really good job. So the philosophy of the committee was to keep everybody as close to home as possible. And that may change next year. And it's not wrong. They did it right this year.
Well, let's take a look at the 4 regions. Number 1 overall seed is Minnesota. They get the number 16 seed Canisius in Fargo. The other half of that bracket, the other 2 Minnesota teams, Minnesota State and St. Cloud State. And I know some people out there from Minnesota are saying, oh, the committee doesn't want more than 1 team in from Minnesota, so they're trying to rig it. No, that's not what's happening. But that is going to be entertaining.
I think so. I think that St. Cloud State, Minnesota State game should be an absolute throwdown. And the one thing that stood out to me about this region is you have the number 1 overall seed and 3 champions. Minnesota did not win the Big Ten, but Canisius won Atlantic, St. Cloud won the NCHC, Minnesota State won the CCHA. That is what I think makes this an even better region, is that you have 3 teams that are white hot and a team that held the lead in their championship game in the 3rd period. So these are 4 really good teams. And don't sleep on Canisius. I know by now people should know this, that the number 4 seed, the number 16 overall team that gets in from Atlantic, can win games. Not only can they win games, this Canisius team is dangerous. They're getting good goaltending. If they can slow down this Minnesota team a little bit, they could be dangerous. I know for sure that Bob Motzko will not overlook Canisius. He's just too good of a coach to do that. But I also think, so this is going back to attendance. This is one of those regions that was sold out. North Dakota fans buying almost all of the tickets. You have to figure on that. But I'm sure that some will sell, but some won't. And those who won't will be rooting as hard for Canisius as any team that they've seen all season.
He already said it. He already knows. He said it on the ESPN show about Canisius. I mean, Bob knows the last time, and I hate to keep bringing this back to us in 2014. This is the last time that they were the number 1 overall seed was against us in 2014. And we had our goalie pulled at the end of that game. So he knows. I mean, Bob knows what the history of Holy Cross and Minnesota and everything that's happened. I mean, he'll have that team ready to play, but Canisius got the makings of an upset. They've got an older team that can score, and they're getting great goaltending right now. So don't ever count that out. I think the last time they were in Fargo, and I could probably be wrong on this, so somebody will fact check me. It did not AIC beat St. Cloud in Fargo?
Yes.
The last time that they were there? Yep. Or has there been one?
There's one after that.
But AIC had beat Fargo or beat St. Cloud when they were number 1 in Fargo. So it has happened there before.
The result of that win was the creation of an AIC fan blog based in Fargo. So there you go. Well, let's look at the next bracket, and that's in Bridgeport. Number 2, Quinnipiac. They could not match up against Colgate, so they take on Merrimack in that region. The other half of that sounds like a great matchup to me, Harvard and Ohio State.
Sneaky, scary first-round opponent for Quinnipiac. Merrimack does not give up goals, so if you're going to beat them, you're going to have to find a way to score. Their goaltending has been phenomenal all the way through the playoffs. They're tested. They went into overtime in every game, double overtime in the quarterfinals, double overtime in the semifinals, overtime in the championship game. Scott Borick, I know that everybody at Merrimack was looking at, we want to win a Hockey East championship, because I think they felt that was probably the most attainable championship. Like an NCAA championship, those are 4 wins that are going to be really tough, but I know that they will show up well. They will get some tickets down there. They'll find a way. Quinnipiac will not be able to take over every seat in that arena with their fan base, I don't think. So Merrimack will find a way to put those buses back in supply this week, and maybe they get another 20 buses of students going down there again. So that one, if there's going to be an upset, I feel like that one's the scary one. And I know that Quinnipiac is a fantastic team. To think that they only had 3 losses coming in to last weekend, if they lost the last 2 games of their season, that would be such a disappointment. But that's a tough opponent. And then the other side, Harvard and Ohio State. You get a lot of draft picks in that one between those 2 teams, and Steve Rollick has had his team going all year. Didn't reach the finals, but I know that they played well down the stretch. And Harvard, as John Powers, I'm going to bring him up again. He said, with all these draft picks, Harvard has not won a single championship this year. They did not win the Beanpot. They did not win the ECAC regular season. They did not win the Ivy League championship. They didn't win that. Then they did not win the postseason in the ECAC. So they're looking to win something. This might be one of Harvard's best teams since the 89 team that won the national championship. And they could honestly walk away without anything to show for it.
I think you said it pretty well there. The only thing is, can you imagine the year Quinnipiac has had, and then they go and they lose back-to-back games in their year? That would be tragic.
It would.
I mean, that for the year that they've had and the team that they have, I think that's far. I think that's you said don't sleep on it. I still think that's going to be awful hard to do.
Let's take a look at the 3rd seed, Michigan, and that loss that Denver had, just like 6th decimal point in the RPI, was enough to put them behind Michigan. So Michigan, the number 3 overall, they'll take on Colgate, and Penn State will have Michigan Tech. 1/1,000,000th of a percentage point in the RPI is the reason that Michigan is in Allentown and Denver is in Manchester. I saw some people online saying that this is an easy cakewalk for Michigan. I don't think it is. Penn State plays Michigan pretty well. That's one thing if they happen to match up. Colgate is on a heater. And Michigan Tech, I don't know what to expect from Michigan Tech. The fact that they didn't reach the CCHA finals doesn't mean much to me. We've seen teams that don't get to where they're supposed to. I'm thinking of Providence in 2015 that didn't even get to the Hockey East semis and won the national championship. So those things happen. And again, a bracket with champions. You had 3 up in the Fargo region. You had no champions in Bridgeport, but you have the Big Ten champion and the ECAC champion here in Allentown, and they're going to face off against one another in the first round.
Don't count out Michigan Tech because they've got a really, really good goalie. And the goalie is what you're going to need right now. They're going to need to get back into their play. They gave up all those quick goals to Northern, couldn't recover, but they've got one of the final 3 for the Richter. They'll be okay. I think they'll be okay. I think Michigan gets by Colgate, and I think it'll be a unbelievable Michigan final. Much to go against the huge crowd that would be there if it was a Penn State Michigan final.
Let's look at the 4th bracket. Number 4 overall seed Denver takes on Cornell, and BU has Western Michigan. And unlike some of these others, you've got 1 league champion and 3 teams that were disappointed in their playoffs.
I think that there's 2 very interesting games here. Obviously, BU comes in the hottest. Denver gets the number 1 overall seed. I don't know what to expect from Cornell. I thought that they were a good second half team, but couldn't get past Harvard. Western, I feel like they're still that kind of juggernaut. They're a dangerous team. I just happened to look it up because I wanted to see if the over-under in this game was 7 or lower. But the over-under has not been put out yet, at least by DraftKings. Boston University is just a slight favorite over Western at this point. But I look at some of these, these games throughout the country, and I'm enamored by this BU Western Michigan matchup. I know that's your alma mater schools, but I mean, I know how well BU played this weekend. I know how much the players on this team, the 10 seniors that returned, really want to keep winning championships. That's a good team, but how do you ignore Denver? That's the other part of it. This is the defending national champion. They had a hiccup in the NCHC semifinals, but if that's the only bump in their road, I still see them as a team that could be a favorite when you're really looking at any regional, certainly, and maybe even for the entire national championship.
And not because they're my alma mater or anything other than that. When that game was posted, I thought, wow, that's the game. That's probably the most intriguing game of that first round. It's very not any more than the Minnesota State St. Cloud. That's intriguing because you got BU that's borderline, could have been a number one seed, very close to being a number one seed. And Western, how about this? When I talked to assistant coach Jason Herter the other day, they thought they could be a 4 seed. And I said, if you're a 4 seed, there's going to be a number one team that gets really, really screwed, because it couldn't have been Denver, because Denver, if they were the fourth number one seed, and Western, if they had fallen one farther, I believe, then
if you switch Western Cornell, that's how close they were.
Yeah. So they would have had to play. They would have had to play somebody that I mean, it's unbelievable, the matchup. It might have been, which really been good for business. And that's why I said to Jeff Schulman, you've got things that are good for business. How about what if a Western Michigan first round, after all the trouble they had with the Great Lakes and all that would have been really, it
doesn't feel so close, but you're talking about, one team that if they had just moved up a spot, and then Michigan, they were only, as I said, 1/1,000,000th of a percentage point away from moving down. That it was very close, and that would have been a heck of a first round. But now I don't think they can even meet until the national title game. Yeah, well, it's, you know what? If as an alum, if they're in the national title, that's a good thing for my alma mater. But that's a really intriguing first round matchup there.
Well, that answered one of the questions we were going to get to next, and so that is your pick for the game you're most looking forward to in the first round. How about you, Jim?
Well, that was going to be my pick. There's no doubt.
No, it's both of ours. Why can't we have the same?
We can certainly. I mean, that's certainly one of them. I think the other one, I really do look forward to that St. Cloud, Minnesota State. Yeah. Like I said, 2 champions, 2 league champions battling it out first round, and they're. I look at we don't get to see all of these teams, play when they're in different conferences. You don't get to see them play enough. But I feel like these 2 teams are pretty evenly matched, and I want to see the experience. I mean, both of them have been to Frozen Fours in the last 2 years. You got to remember that part. And I want to see the experience of Minnesota State, what they learned out of last year's national title game, throw in some new players, which they've got plenty of them. And then, just St. Cloud State, and obviously Brett Larson has done a fantastic job of coaching that team up. So I guess that if after that unbelievable BU Western Michigan, but which, by the way, that opens the tournament. That is the first game of the tournament. So if it is the legendary matchup, we believe, what a start to the tournament. But
we're probably pumping it up, and now it's going to be
it'll be a 6-1 game, but that's okay.
Well, and if it is Minnesota State that prevails there, and if Minnesota takes care of business, then you have a rematch of the semifinal, which Bob Motzko last year bitterly talked about losing to a grizzled team. Now look up the word grizzled. That means having gray hair. I know Minnesota State was older, but that would be an interesting rematch right there. We mentioned Quinnipiac and Merrimack. That to me is the one most ripe for an upset of a number 1 seed in a region. And the way Merrimack has been playing, who knows what could happen there. That's a team that seems to be believing in itself. I'm going to look forward to that one.
3 weeks ago, we were talking about the way Merrimack was playing in a negative way.
Yeah.
How teams can turn it around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So all the ones that lost don't and didn't win their championships. I know we're talking about champions. Don't pass on those, because 2-3 weeks ago, we were talking about Merrimack could have arguably the biggest disappointment of the second half.
Yeah, they could have missed the tournament. That win on Friday got them in.
It certainly did. And then they still had to hang on. They are the last team in the field when you really come down to it. They are not the lowest seed, but they are the last team in the field. They were the last at large, and had Colorado College beat St. Cloud on Saturday, they Merrimack would have been out.
So they like to talk each year about a bracket of death. Is there a bracket of death among these four?
I think Fargo. That's a really hard bracket. 3 champions and the number 1 seed. That's really hard.
You're really gonna go take that now. The Minnesota fans are gonna run with this conspiracy theory all over Twitter.
I don't care what they've
been doing it all day.
Let them run wherever they want. I don't care. I mean, it is really hard. That's a tough bracket. And listen, I'm not saying that the committee did anything wrong. I mean, I think if you look at the bracket that Jason and I put out on Saturday night, the only thing that we didn't have, we basically had 13 of the 16 teams in the exact spot they ended up. It was Western Michigan, Minnesota State, and Ohio State that we had just twisted around. I thought it was. I mean, you could have thrown Ohio State there instead. I'm sorry. Yeah, you could have. You could have had. I think I had Ohio State there. You could have had Western there. I mean, any of those. No, I guess you couldn't have Western. I'm sorry. It was Minnesota State, Ohio State, and Michigan Tech. Those were the 3 schools that we had just twisted around. We had the Manchester bracket exact. So you could have put any of those 3 schools there, and you'd still have a really tough bracket. Minnesota State, the fact that they're a champion, that makes it a little bit more difficult. But Ohio State and Michigan Tech wouldn't have been any easier. Would you want to have the one of the best goaltenders in the country in your region? Would you want to have an Ohio State team that we know is well coached and seems to succeed in these events? I mean, there was no way of making that bracket easier.
I'm going to nominate for a bracket of death Manchester, because when you have the number 4 top seed, that means everybody's bunched a little closer together. Any one of those 4 teams, you can make a compelling argument for Denver, Cornell, BU, or Western to come out of that bracket.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, that's a very difficult one. I'm not trying to say that Bridgeport and Allentown are suddenly the easy brackets, but I actually think that this is one, and maybe it's suitable because we've watched this whole season change so much. I mean, there was a point that it wasn't too long ago. We had 6 Hockey East teams potentially in the field. We ended up with 2. There was a long time for this whole season. We had 1 ECAC team in the field. We ended up with 4. The NCHC only getting 3. It's been a while since they've only had 3 teams. And then the CCHA gets their share. I feel like we're seeing some of the best. I hate the P word, parity, but I'm going to use it because it's right. We have some of the best parity. So how do you have any bracket that's not difficult? But I do think that those 2 we've just mentioned are really, really tough.
Is there an easy one?
No.
You hinted there wasn't. I mean, some people are pointing to Michigan as having an easy ride, but Colgate's hot, and Penn State and Michigan Tech are good teams. There's no easy route to the Frozen Four.
It's the NCAA tournament. There's no easy route. I mean, you're still going to have to beat some really good teams. Michigan's still going to have to beat a Michigan Tech that was in the top 10, Penn State, who's been in the top 10 all year. And like you said, Colgate, who's feeling it right now. There's no easy brackets. The best teams will figure out the best teams on this weekend will rise to the top. Because I hate to say the best teams, because we've seen the best teams sometimes lose. So I would say the best teams on this weekend will rise to the top. And it's not always, there's no easy brackets. I was in Providence the one year. I think you were there too, Jimmy. And everybody talked about it was easy for Mankato, but their biggest deal was having to play Providence in the finals. Well, Providence,
first round,
yeah. But then they had to beat Cornell too. So, I mean, there's nothing easy about the tournament. And whoever says that doesn't know much about hockey. So,
yeah, I mean, if Michigan ends up against Penn State, it's a road game for Michigan when all is said and done. And Michigan lost to Penn State 3-0 on the road this year.
Dun dun dun.
We mentioned it up top. Just quickly right now, today's a big day for the transfer portal. Grad students and students that have been released from their teams could put in before this. The day after the announcement of the championship field, there's 60 days for everybody else to put into the portal. And we're going to see a whole bunch of names show up today.
I'm predicting the over-under DraftKings Vegas line of 200 people going in the portal moving forward. Just think about it. That's three, 4 people a team, and it can be easily done with 60 teams. I mean, you're going to see teams that they have to because they've recruited out. They can't keep their 5th years. I'm saying it between grad students, 5th years, and underclassmen, that there'll be at least 200 because they can't keep their 5th years. There's going to be players that the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. There's going to be players that overvalue themselves too. And there's going to be players that just want to change the scenery. So I'm here. I've got popcorn ready. I've got my phone ready to make some calls. And, we need 10 players. So I'm going to be a player.
This is kind of like a free agent release day in the NFL, and you're just sitting there as the GM. But I'd wager over under. I'd say 250. And the reason I say that, you're going to have 150 grad students or 50-year players that are trying to use that last year. And listen, at the end, maybe 100 of those stay in the portal. They might never get the next opportunity. But I bet there's going to be 100 undergrads who just are unhappy in their situation. They're going to use this opportunity. Yeah.
I think 2 per team. You're probably, maybe 250. It's 66% was the number last year. 66% of the Division I players that went into the portal found new homes. So it's not always easier, but once again, Augustana needs to build a team. We need to build a team. I'm like Deion Sanders. If you want to come, let's go. Except I'm not Coach Prime. I'm Coach past my prime.
You're going to be part Deion Sanders and part Jerry Maguire this week. Well, it should be interesting. There are a few sources out there to see who's in the portal. Coaches have access. Various media people have access to people with access. So you can check out there for some of those. So it's going to be a great week of regionals leading to the Frozen Four, and we'll have one more regular season episode before we do our 4 shows in Tampa. We'll have that episode next week as we look at the Frozen Four field. That'll be terrific to see 4. That. Yeah.
Down to 4 next week.
Yeah.
And it's probably down to about 4 days with me.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Derek, the thing is, we've been talking about all the great attendance at all the games. Last year, things did not feel back to normal. This finally feels back to normal. The crowds are back. The students are back. Everything seems like it should be.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I guess we'll wrap it right there then. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get one of the remaining seats now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcast at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly, Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.